The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
From Mallory Square in Key West to the Governor's Mansion in Tallahassee and all points beyond, you're listening to the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com, your source for all things related to the craft beer community in the Sunshine State. And now your host, Dave Butler.
Get your mosquito repellent on and make sure your watertight boots are laced up nice and tight. It's another episode of the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com. This is Dave, your host and author, and we are heading to the Wetlands today. And by Wetlands, I don't mean the Everglades. I mean the taproom at Swamphead Brewery in Gainesville, Florida. If you have never been to this taproom, it is really fantastic. I love it. It's just beautiful, beautiful overuse of natural wood, and I am all there for it. So let's backtrack just a little bit. So we are in Gainesville. Our last episode was over at Cypress and Grove. There are a couple of other breweries in Gainesville that we were not able to record with on this recent trip that producer Steve and I took. Hopefully we will get them on future episodes coming up, obviously, in the future. But Swamphead we were able to talk to, and I'm very happy about that because when it comes to Gainesville craft beer, Swamphead was the first one that I ever tried. Long time ago. If you go back in time on FloridaBeerBlog.com, you can find some of them. In fact, I think the first one was Blueberry Cottonmouth. Yes, Blueberry Cottonmouth, which was their wit beer, if I do believe. And that was back when Swamphead only released beers in 22-ounce bombers. That was their only packaging. Now, obviously, the industry has shifted quite a bit. Go to their tap room. You can find some 16-ounce tall boys, a lot of 12-ounce six-packs, and almost no glass at all in sight. They've obviously gone through a redesign of the logo, which looks very, very nice. They are continuing to roll out some amazing, not just their year-round releases, but also some seasonal killers. Year-round, by the way, Midnight Oil is one of my favorite styles in the state, and I did not realize exactly how popular Big Nose IPA is here in Florida. And to hear about all of that, we are going to be speaking to Shane Matthews. He's one of the head brewers at Swamphead. He's also one of the cellar people there, and we're going to be talking to him about literally everything. We'll talk about the beers. We'll talk about their environmental focus, not just on celebrating the environment that is North Central Florida, but also how they, as part of their processes, try to be as environmentally conscious and environmentally friendly as possible. And also, we're just going to have a good time as well, because there's a lot to talk about in terms of Alachua County and craft beer. So this is Shane Matthews, one of the head brewers and cellar people at Swamphead Brewery in Gainesville, Florida. Enjoy. My first question is this: what led you to Swamphead? What led you into beer and to Swamphead? Because you said that you did not come from a beer background. So why this industry and why this brewery in particular?
Well, so really coincidental, honestly. So I'd been very aware of Swamphead, really love this facility. I was up here buying ingredients for homebrew and stopped here for a beer, and they were hiring, and I didn't really know much about the industry. So I said, hey, what does that position do? It was a cellarman. And they're like, it's an assistant, kind of like an assistant brewer. You take care of, everything post-production. I was like, oh, that sounds really fun. I think I'd like to try that. So I applied, and yeah, it's been great.
It seems that with the industry, the cellarman position is really the big entry level. If even if you've done a little bit of stuff at home, whether you built a system yourself or you got Mr. Beer or whatnot, if you want to know what it's like to be on an industrial scale, everybody tends to start off as a cellarman. It's kind of like the dishwasher of a craft brewery.
For sure. So one thing that's, I guess, unique about being a production facility as well, we start all of our people in packaging. So canning, kegging, that's our dishwasher position here at Swamphead. So everybody starts out there. It's the easiest position to learn, and you kind of build your concepts on that. And then we move people into the cellar position. And one of the great things about Swamphead, one of the things I love, is our training program and how much we cross-train. So when you get into our training program, you're not just going to be on packaging for your entire career here. You're going to learn cellar. You're going to learn, limited bits about brewing. And then if you are interested in the brewing path, then obviously that gets accelerated. But one of the great things is just how much cross-training we do with everyone. So even being a brewer, I have cellar days, I have brew days, I have other days. So it's really cool to come in and kind of have an open book as far as what you're going to be doing on that day.
And it kind of seems like the entire company is focused on that cross-training ability.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great.
It's kind of amazing. Are there things about the industry that you did not learn, that you had to learn really quickly, that you did not realize happened when you're brewing on an industrial scale for distro and package and whatnot?
Yeah, it's definitely a different type of environment. I've since gone to friends' breweries and other places and brewed on smaller systems and different systems and systems that are not really, let's say, air quotes, production. And a lot of the mentality is different. Like, it's a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more chill in some areas, whereas we have a production schedule. So we have deadlines we need to meet. We have certain criteria we need to hit. We have, obviously quality control is a huge part of what we do here. So, making sure that everything's hits those numbers and hits those goals. That's one of the really big things for me that I found as being different is the level of seriousness there is here. I mean, yeah, we're making a super fun product and it's a great time. Like, everybody has a good time at work, but there's a seriousness to it. And in some smaller places, you don't see that. I'm not going to say they're not serious about it, but there's a little bit more levity in what they can do versus being a production facility where we have, a little bit more strict, OSHA guidelines and things like that.
I was going to say, with distribution comes great responsibility.
Absolutely.
And I kind of want to talk about that distro and the beers that you're making, some of which other people have said basically, is the beer of Gainesville. You go anywhere in this town and you're going to find that beer on tap.
Yeah.
But before we get to that point, if you could step back, and for some of our listeners that haven't really known about Swamphead before, if you could give a good umbrella overview of the brewery and kind of who you are.
Yeah, so Swamphead, who we are. So the brewery was founded in 2008 with our first beer going into distribution in 2009. So we're OG Florida. We're up there with a lot of the other breweries that have been around. I mean, obviously not the first, but we're definitely early on in the spectrum. So as a brewery, one of the initial concepts has always been, local Florida first kind of concept. So, for Wild Night, our honey cream ale, we get local honey. We try to source as much stuff locally as possible. We try to be as neutral as possible. So, like, we've got solar panels on the roof. We were the first brewery in Florida to incorporate solar into our footprint, trying to keep, right now they mostly power our tasting room, keeping our tasting room almost, neutral as far as power footprint goes, which is a huge win for us. And then, moving into the way that we clean and the way that we try to reclaim as much water as possible, and we try not to waste anything. We're very, that's part of our daily conversation, is we try to not waste anything we don't have to waste. So that's always been part of the footprint and always been part of the game plan.
And that's got to be pretty difficult because cleaning and brewing, those are both very water heavy projects. How do you do something so dependent on something while trying to keep a focus on conserving it at the same time?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously there is going to be waste. There's no way around it. So if we can find a way, like with our O system, our reverse osmosis water, where we reclaim that and we're going to use that for our cleaning process. So we're taking a byproduct that could potentially just be dumped, and we're finding a different use for it because it's still water. It's still viable. It's just not something we're going to put in our beer. But, finding another use for it is a huge part of, how we can maintain that smaller footprint and really, I'm not going to say give back, but try not to take as much.
Gotcha. And I know you also mentioned that you're trying to go to reverse osmosis water for the beer system. How did that conversation get started? Because that's not an easy conversation to begin.
Yeah, so we do several reverse osmosis beers as required by style. But moving into the industry, moving forward and seeing that, what styles become popular at what times, as the demand goes up, the need for us to be able to, stay agile and compete. So it really came out of just demand. There's demand for those types of styles. So in order to be able to meet that, we had to make some changes in order for us to be able to have that production viability, to be able to make 60 or 90 or 120 barrels of a beer that's reverse osmosis is a completely different ballgame than just, making a beer of the same scale. So yeah, being able to maneuver around and respond to the demand of, what people want, what's popular and what people are wanting to drink and keep our brand out there and keep it fresh and keep it current.
And I was going to say, do you get a lot of people that are interested in learning about the sort of environmentality of Swamphead, kind of really want to know, not just out of curiosity, but out of kind of an intrinsic need to support businesses that are environmentally focused?
Yeah, we do. We do a lot of different events here at the brewery. We have like our tree fest every year where we raise money in order to buy trees that we go out and plant. As a brewery, we do it as a part of our team building, and then we also partner with solar companies, and we partner with other companies that are environmentally conscious as well. So we really try to focus on those types of groups and focus on not just our sustainability, but helping give back to the community, helping give back to nature. So all those programs together really become who we are as a brewery and what we're trying to do.
It's kind of amazing. And talking about the brewery itself, we do have to mention the taproom that we are in, affectionately called the Wetlands.
Yes.
Which makes sense because it really does have the sort of feel of, I guess, a ranger station at a state park, a lot of the woods. And what's interesting about it that you were telling us, because it overlooks a rather large lake, massive outdoor section, but that's not the extent of how much land the brewery owns, because you've got an extensive, I guess, do we want to call it a forest?
Yeah. So, part of the whole program here is, when Luke got this property, he wanted to make sure that some was kept set aside. So an acre's been set aside for conservation that will not be developed. So that way the view from our tasting room is going to remain the same no matter how long the brewery's here. 50 years from now when you come to Swamphead, you're going to look out this window and it's going to look the same because that land over there is protected, which is amazing. If you think about somebody coming into this space and saying, okay, I'm going to give up a significant portion of the land that I'm not going to do anything with, which I think goes to the heart of, again, who we are, is we want to try to give back. We want to try to be more neutral. We want to, conserve and partner with those like-minded folks. So I think it all goes to just who we are as a brand.
It's kind of amazing. And I would assume that you have been requested to sell said land, because it is sort of your buffer between the Wetlands and I-75, which is just close enough to where it would be an eyesore if that land had been cleared.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in that part of the conversation, but I'm quite certain those conversations have been had, I'm sure, over the years. I mean, behind us on a couple sides, there's apartment complexes that you can kind of walk through to. So I'm sure development would definitely be something that's very interesting to other people, but again, it's just not part of our plan.
Awesome. You hinted at it a little bit before, but I would love to talk about how the environmentality goes into determining the beers, not just the spirit and the themes and the names and everything behind them, but also how sort of celebrating North Central Florida is for the massive tap list that's behind us.
I think part of it is availability, obviously. Like with our local honey, there's limited quantities of that, so that kind of determines that sort of production. And then, from our like bats and brews, program that we do where we bring a bat conservation group in.
We're talking like bats, like Batman.
Yeah, like
bats.
Batman bats. Yeah, we're very interested in partnering with those people, and that goes into some of our. So that we have a beer called Sky Puppies, which is dedicated to that event. So we kind of tailor our beers to the environment. So if you come in and you see, like, why is it called Sky Puppies? Well, because proceeds of that beer are going to help out bats. That's why. So a lot of our beers, go to those sort of things and are keyed into, maybe not so much of what we're doing, but also awareness as well. So raising awareness to certain issues, raising awareness to just, go out there and have a good time, but be responsible with your space and be responsible with, what you do when you're out, out in the woods camping. I always kind of go with like a Boy Scout mentality of like leave no trace. So we kind of try to do that here. We try to leave as little behind as possible.
And I do find it interesting because I remember purchasing Swamphead beers way back in the day when the only packaged beer were the 22-ounce glass bombers, which
Right.
are a distant memory.
Right.
As I'm taking a look at the case and all I'm seeing are tall boys and 12-ounce cans.
Right. Yeah, so, I mean, that's just a couple things of that. I mean, obviously, aluminum is way more recyclable and way easier to, have a smaller footprint, from the weight of the cans, being cheaper and easier and less fuel consumption to transport. That's all conscious decisions of the brand to try to be, as small as possible. So moving away from those big, bulky, heavy bottles, one, it's easier to can, which is nice, but there's also the other benefits, that I just talked about. So it's kind of a hand-in-hand thing. How can we still be out in the market, have our products available to the customers wherever they want to buy them, and also being conscious of the fact that, hey, we want to do this, as eco-friendly as possible.
Well, it's been interesting because you said that this is not an industry that you started in. This is kind of, I guess, a late stage addition to the life. How has this been, not just brewing, but the craft beer industry in general, been different from what you had experienced in your professional life? Because, we've been talking, there's some differences in this industry than pretty much any other industry on earth.
Absolutely. So for me, one of the things I love about the craft beer industry is the community and the camaraderie. And that goes down to a lot of different things. I mean, I know you were... So my first craft brewery I ever walked into was Due South, down in Boynton Beach.
Wow, that's it's a long way away from Gainesville.
It is. I have family down there. My wife's family's from down there. So
okay.
That was the first place I ever walked into, first craft beer. I mean, I've had stuff on shelves, obviously, here and there, but like first local Florida-made beer, that was the first one. And then fast forward several years later, when they were getting ready to close, very sad day, because we always went down a couple times a year to their events. But I ended up buying their pilot system when they closed down. So pilot system being a half barrel, 15-gallon system.
And you purchased the system just for you?
For me at home.
Okay.
Yeah, for myself at home, yeah. And being about 4.5, 5 hours away from them and finding out about this sale on a Tuesday is not great timing. So, fortunately, again, since it is such a great community, Scott, who was working at Nobo at the time, or working at Due South at the time, now works at Nobo. I contacted him and said, "Hey, man, if I send you the money, can you, pay it for me and then just hold it?" And then he was like, "Yeah," and then he was able to take it over to Nobo because I know the guys over there as well. I know Tim better.
The Dorn Blazers are amazing guys.
They're awesome guys. And they let the system sit there for a week before I could get it.
And they don't exactly have a ton of space.
They do not, especially this was before the expansion, so they had even less space.
Yeah.
So, having that thing take up space back there for a week and a half was really, really awesome of them. So, again, for me, coming from different industries where, you look at competition one way to coming into this industry where, yes, we're competing. We're all making beer that is going to market, but we're also doing it in a way of, hey, let me show you what I'm doing. I want you to see how we do things because there's 100 ways of making beer. Everybody has a different methodology to it. So being able to go pretty much to any brewery in the state and just, hang out and chat and talk. And then, before you know it, as my wife points out, I get invited to a wedding because I just have that kind of personality. So that's wonderful. I love that aspect of craft brewing. It's such a community. There's so much camaraderie, and the competition is just kind of a side effect of just, we all happen to be selling beer, but we all want everybody to do well.
And at a certain point, the competition turns into bragging rights among friends as opposed to I hate your guts now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's definitely competition, but it's more about, it's more about the beer itself than the sales aspect of it. So like, when we go to, like CBC and one of our friend breweries wins, we're excited for them. If we don't win, okay, we're like, man, that's going to be terrible when I have to talk to them again and see how great they did. But that's just part of it. You win some, you lose some, you come back next year and you win more. And then, that all fuels that fun, competitive spirit that we all have, because we all want to make the best product we possibly can. That's the goal. We all want to make world-class beer. So having those friendships and having that camaraderie and that, that little ability to kind of poke at each other and jab at each other and do it in a fun way is great.
Now, here lies my question. Would you consider that to be competition? The reason I mentioned that is, let's take Nobo, for example, in Boynton Beach. For us, because we're based in South Florida, it takes very little for us to find Nobo on tap or in stores. Go to whatever beer store you want to go to, and it's maybe half an hour, and we can be at the brewery. Whereas there is no Swamphead by us to be found at all. It's not on taps. It's not on package. It is nowhere. But you come up here to Gainesville, you are literally, I had other brewers tell me Big Nose is kind of the beer of Gainesville. You can find it literally everywhere. And I would assume most craft beer drinkers, unless they are really in the know, wouldn't know who Nobo is. So is there that aspect of maybe there's like, would you still consider it to be sort of a competition, or is the state so sequestered that you really compete with who's around you, and other states may be, they may just as well be another continent away?
I think there's two stages to the competition here in Florida as far as beer goes. I think the first level of competition is what beers you like and how your beer stacks up to that beer. So like, for example, like market share wise, we're definitely not in Nobo's market as far as our back door, but we do have some beer down there. Like you can get Big Nose in South Florida.
Really?
Yes, you can. Oh. It's, that's our goal is for right now, Big Nose for sure, but to keep expanding. Our sales team is always working with partners down there. We have several distributors down there. In fact, when I went to Nobo's anniversary last year, I brought some Big Nose with me so we could give it out. We couldn't sell it, obviously, because we didn't go through the distributor. But that was one of the things. It's like, should we just send this to our distributor and then they can do whatever they want with it, or do I take it, give it out as samples, and then bring it home with me? Which is what we ended up doing just because of timing. But, and then having some people down there say, "Hey, I love Big Nose. I haven't had it in so long. Why? Where can I find it?" Be like, "Okay, well, it's available here, 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 and here." So, it is available. It is out there. And tooting our own horn a little bit, I'm going to go a little further than I probably should. But Big Nose has been consistently the number 2 or 3 draft in the state, behind the now infamous Bud Light. So we're not talking about just in craft markets. We're talking about in the grand scheme of beer. So
really?
Looking at those, yes.
I had no idea Big Nose got that big, pardon the pun.
Yeah, no, that's a great pun. But yeah, no, it really is. And as far as state goes, another thing you may not know is for 16 ounces, Big Nose has been the number 1 can sales in 16 ounce several times over. So we're very proud of those facts and figures. So the hard part about having distributors, and I know you guys have had conversations about distribution in Florida and the pros and cons of that. So I'm not going to go into that, but the hard part is just getting those partnerships to push your brand and say, hey, we have a market. We just need you to help us, just put it someplace. People will find it. They'll buy it. We have that visibility. It's just a matter of, pushing the envelope and keeping it down there, which is why what our sales team is focusing on.
That's amazing. So I kind of want to talk about Big Nose for a second, because obviously you did not formulate Big Nose. By the time you came to Swamphead, Big Nose was a key player, was major, and I'm sure that you enjoyed that particular beer, well before you decided to brew it. What kind of stress falls on your shoulder when it becomes your time to be the torchbearer for
So-
something as big as that?
Tremendous amount of stress, honestly. So I love my job. I come to work happy every morning, even though I get up at 4 a.m. I come to work super happy. Always have a great time when I'm here. I can tell you the first solo Big Nose batch day of my life was the most stressful day I've ever experienced. And I've had jobs where I've had thousands of employees that I was responsible for. Brewing that first solo batch of Big Nose, I was sweating bullets, and I probably wasn't even hot out. It was probably in the winter time, so I'm just sweating bullets, worried about this beer, taking it seriously. And I think for me, I probably put more stress on myself than I need to. But yeah, that was definitely, knowing how big the brand is and how important the brand is, and knowing our quality processes, and stepping into that role and being like, okay, I'm responsible for this now. It was a huge thing, and that hasn't diminished. Maybe I don't sweat as much for that reason now, but my stress level with worrying about that, because now I'm more confident, obviously, than I wasn't my first solo day, but it's the gravity of it hits me every day. It's like we're making something that we want to be proud of, that we go the extra mile to use only fresh ingredients. So if our label says it's got lime in it, it's got lime in it. It's not, we zest it in house, like our ginger ale that's on right now. All that ginger was juiced here.
Really?
So we try to do everything as much as possible in house. So, using fresh ingredients, using all these processes, not wanting to make a goofy error. It's all part of who our brand is, and I think why our beers are so successful when they're out in the market.
Is there any less stress when it's something that you're making for the first time that you developed versus something like Midnight Oil or Wild Night that people have known about and enjoyed for over a decade?
I'm not going to say it's less stress. It's a different stress, because then you get a little bit of pride in it. So there's been, we can all participate in recipe development here, which is one of the great things. So I've had a couple things that have come on draft that maybe the recipe idea was my idea. I may or may not have brewed it, but for me, then you want to track those sales, and it's like, oh, how is that doing? It's like, oh, that's doing really well. And then sometimes, you do something and you think it turns out great, and the public's just like, I don't know about that. It's fine, I guess, but we're just, maybe I'll get it next week, but I want this right now. So there's a lot of pride that goes into that, aspect of it, being able to have the creative side of it, and especially when you get a hit, when you get something that works and the people love it, then you're like, oh man, really, really happy about that. So like right now we have a beer on that it wasn't my recipe, but I did the pilot batch of, and now it's on draft for the second time here in the tasting room. So that's very exciting to see.
What beer is that?
It's called Thermocline. It's a cold IPA.
Oh, cold IPAs. That's all of a sudden that's becoming a big thing.
Yep.
So I know Three Daughters just released theirs for Father's Day
Yeah.
not too long ago. So I find that's starting to become the new.
Yeah, it is. That is one thing I find super interesting about the craft beer industry as well, is you'll come up with something that you think is an original great idea, and then you drive around and it's like, okay, 20 other breweries are doing the exact same thing at the exact same time. How does that even happen?
Hive mind.
Yeah, hive mind.
Yeah,
exactly.
or you hit that mark where it's like, oh, wow, this is brand new. I just made this. And then it's like, nope, Belgian monks did it 100 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
And I do find it interesting that if you had asked me, 5-6 years ago, my first visit here to Swamphead, if you were going to be doing the big fruited sours, didn't think that North Central Florida would want that. And now the both of you are drinking, what is it, Florida Slushy?
Florida Slush, yeah.
Which is just everything that it needs to be and more. Is it surprised you that that's something that the public here in Gainesville has wanted and that Swamphead embraced?
Yeah, a little bit. Being in a college town, I think we get different flavor profiles than what other areas are looking for. A lot of the, I would say like style beers like Belgian triples and quads don't do as well here. But, for whatever reason, our sour market, our IPA market, that's really kind of what Gainesville gravitates towards. So, having a nice selection of those things, and then obviously using fresh ingredients helps. You don't get kind of weird off flavors from something that might have been an extract or something like that. So I think the way you do it, and then the way you market it and the way that you present it to the public, like Lemon Days was kind of an experiment a few years ago that now is one of our seasonal releases that's going to be available a lot more. That's going to, kind of going to be our flagship sour that's going to be available, on a broader scale. So, we're very excited about that. So having that ability and agility to be able to move with the market is really, I think, one of the keys to Swamphead's success.
Awesome. And obviously your continued success here as a brewer. I'll end with this. What's that next big recipe that you want to make? What's the thing that, we haven't done here in the Wetlands yet, but you've just been itching to do it and you're going to get to it eventually?
We do so many different types of things that it's every time I think, hey, we have never done this, and then I'll be like, well, yeah, we did. We did that like 5 years ago, and it didn't really work. So let me think. What for me? So I like Belgian style beers. So we did a quad not that long ago, and it was fantastic. And now we got some resting in barrels. So I'm very excited for that to come out. So we'll have a barrel aged quad coming out soon. I really like. We did a triple. It didn't do great, but for it's funny because you'll come in the tasting room and all of us on production will be drinking like one style of beer all at the same time, and then everybody else is drinking other stuff that comes in. So it's very interesting that what we like in the industry versus what the consumer likes. So I just want to be part of the next thing that the consumer likes. That's for me. That's the next challenge is can we bring, like a hazy or something to the market or a hazy pale to the market and make that a brand that's recognizable throughout the state. So that's for me, that's more what I'd like to see is that aspect of it than maybe an individual style, but like see what that next beer, I'm not going to say discovery, but next beer discovery for the people out in the public. That's kind of what's exciting.
So it's time to bring the Rauch beer back. Thank you so much for your time. I do appreciate it.
We've talked about that. Probably no.
Yeah, no. All right. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I was very happy with this episode. I enjoy Swamphead quite a bit. I have gone to the brewery years and years and years ago and actually got a nice tour and a sit-down conversation with Luke Kemper, the co-founder of Swamphead. This was long before the podcast existed. In fact, if you remember, a couple of episodes ago, we sat down and spoke with Kiffin Ayers over at High Springs Brewing in High Springs, Florida. This was back when they were still a brewery in planning. They had the original location that they were leaving, and their current location was still a welding shop. And so that's how long it's been since I've been able to get back to Swamphead. It's nice to see the good things that they've been doing are still in place, and they've only just added awesome stuff to that as well. So we are going to be leaving Gainesville. That was our last episode in Hogtown itself, but we're going to be heading north for a couple of episodes. And if you know anything about this particular region of Florida and the craft breweries that are there, you will know the madness that is coming very soon. We also have a couple of festivals that we are going to be recording live at. Hopefully that audio has already been in the can by the time this episode is released, or we will be close to getting that edited and sent out. Regardless of what happens, make sure to follow us on social media so that you get all the updates that you need when they come out. We are at Florida Beer Blog if you are on Instagram, Twitter, Threads, any of those. Facebook, we're FL Beer Blog. And we are floridabeerblog.com and floridabeerpodcast.com on the internet. If you want to reach out to us directly, floridabeerblog@gmail.com is the best place to do that. Or you can check out the Florida Podcast Network, which we are a very proud member of. And those shows will all be listed for you at floridapodcastnetwork.com. Also, make sure to like and subscribe to us on the podcasting app of your choice. And if you can, such as Apple Podcasts, for example, if you can leave a review for us, please do so. It helps us out a tremendous amount. Our intro announcer is Jeff Brozovich. Field producer is Steve Pekala. Executive producer for the Florida Podcast Network and Grand High Poobah is Jemmy Legagneur. This is David, your host and author. Thank you so much for listening to us. We will be back with another episode of the Florida Beer Podcast next week. In the meantime, drink Florida craft.